Well, welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Reporting Norms. Today, our topic is transforming the CFO function with generative AI. Obviously, Gen AI is a topic that everybody's talking about these days. And with me today to talk about this topic, I have a seasoned guest, seasoned professional, and his name is Wayne Robinson. And I will go ahead and introduce you, Wayne, because you've done a lot of things in your career. Wayne is an exceptionally accomplished senior program leader specializing in finance and lead to success transformations. With a career spanning over 2 decades, including a significant role at Salesforce, he has consistently driven complex financial and sales system transformation for major corporations like Visa, Cisco, BNP Paribas, KPMG, and Deloitte. Wayne excels at defining overall strategy and multi-year digital transformation roadmaps, incorporating the optimization of financial and billing systems with technologies such as SAP S/4HANA and Hyperion, including HFM S-based planning. He meticulously leads end-to-end Salesforce transformation projects, managing timelines, budgets, and resources. His approach leverages agile methodologies, including Scrum, Kanban, and CI/CD to enhance collaboration and accelerate delivery. He also expertly implements RAID controls and chairs a change control board to ensure strategic alignment and manage risks. His deep expertise includes spearheading the integration of Salesforce CPQ with existing billing systems to streamline the quote to cash process. Wayne has transformed finance operations through the integration S/4HANA, Salesforce, Sales Cloud, and Microsoft Dynamics, and has implemented MuleSoft integration solutions connecting Salesforce and NetSuite. He has also significantly improved cash flow by streamlining financial processes like invoicing and collections, and has major upgrades of Hyperion for enhanced financial consolidation, reporting, and analytics. Wayne is highly regarded for his ability to foster cross-functional collaboration, build strong relationships, influencing key decisions for successful outcomes. So with that, Wayne, welcome to the program. And how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Norm. I appreciate the introduction, and it's fun to be on the program.
Excellent, excellent. As I said earlier, our topic today is transforming the CFO function with Gen AI. And obviously, it's an area that everyone's talking about today. And so, with so much manual work being done, some estimate much as 70% manual work in finance and accounting processes can be potentially done away with Gen AI, in addition to gaining better insight in cash flow predictability way in advance of any issues. And so when we kind of think about the Gen AI revolution, how it applies to finance, there's a lot happening in this space. So tell us about what you've seen, especially from the CFO value chain perspective.
Thanks, Norm, for the question. I think the key point you made is really this is already happening. So right now, people are cutting month-end close from 10 to 3 days. And just to statistically, just to cite, an expert, McKinsey did a survey and they said 71% of the CFOs using GI report productivity gains. In that same survey, they said 70% of the CEOs expect an efficiency jump. So the key point here is that, people are not working less. Teams are not working less. They're working smarter. So they're using AI for analysis, insights, and partnerships. I've seen a lot of situation where, people wanted the role to be, more strategic role. You run into a lot of people in finance that spend too much time, not doing analysis, not looking at insights, not really partnering with my customers, but I'm spending time just, in Excel. And so what AI does, it enhances that productivity. It's allowing finance to step into that long awaited role. When I say long, I'd say over the last, 10, 15 years, you could talk to people and they say, well, hey, I want my role to be more strategic. And so that's really one of the key takeaways here. AI is allowing finance to be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, and as a result, play a more strategic role within the CFO value chain.
Yeah, it makes total sense. This is an area that is ripe for automation and up-leveling for staff and having them utilize their skill set. So let's dive into one of the first areas, I think, for many finance, accounting professionals, CFOs, CAOs, controllers is FP&A. in the financial planning process. So maybe you could describe for what you've been seeing how Gen AI has been applied in the FP&A organization to gain better insight in the numbers quickly, et cetera.
Yeah, well, like, absolutely. So when you really think about FP&A, and I'm going to really focus on kind of variance analysis.
Hmm.
So if you think about the old way, analysis pool, Excel, manual calculations, you spend a ton of hours explaining. That's kind of the old way. And for many people, that's the current state, to be honest. The new way is really where we could use AI to know our ERP via APIs. And then we could give it a very simple prompt. Say, compare SG&A versus budget, flag anything greater than 10%. And let's assume we're in the second quarter, that's forecast the third quarter. So the impact of doing that really is that, we could go from something that in the old way might have taken 5 days to something that takes 4 hours. And so one thing I want to focus on is that AI is not really replacing anything. It's just providing the information so that, people in finance can make better judgments. And that's a really important distinction. You really still need the team. You just need a more efficient way to do it. And this is just a more efficient way to do it. It's just connected to your ERP, put in the right prompts and get the information you needed. Have AI summarize it for it so you don't have to spend days doing that. And, there's data to support this. So, PwC says that financial costs, go down in that, you can improve your revenue by 25%. Part of that is by shifting your staff to doing more insights, kind of what I talked about at the beginning. So finance teams are moving to the strategic roles. McKinsey says 22% of CFOs are looking at using Gen AI to do this. And so this means that that 22%, they'll have a huge head start, as part of kind of early adopters. So I really think the really key takeaway here is that, imagine spending 60% of your time looking at data versus 60% of your time on strategy. It's a big leap, right? Big difference, right? That's what the finance teams want to do. That's what the CFO wants. They got a lot of smart people like you, Norm, in finance. And, they want you to see you. They don't want to see you just like, doing calculations in Excel. They really want to take all of that energy and focus on, we'll give you the data and then we want you to do the analysis. And that's what AI can do for you.
Yeah, that sounds very transformative, especially in the planning area for FP&A teams. Let's pivot just a little bit to the accounting side. So, financial reporting, SEC reporting, external reporting. What are some of the use cases, applications for how Gen AI might be helpful for teams focused on SEC reporting compliance?
So one thing it could do, it could draft an MD&A for you. It could check it for consistency, and then it could validate the XBRL. What's that mean? So that probably takes something that takes 5 people 2 weeks to do to probably something that takes 3 people 1 week to do. So, everybody's always focused on what's the impact? What are the results? So typically what I'm seeing is that you're going to see fewer SEC comments, cleaner audits. And so what's that going to mean? That, the audit committee is going to feel more confident, right? Because they're not seeing these comments. So again, now what some of the studies are saying that AI is cutting review time by half and reducing, the number of comment letters dramatically. So what's the key thing I'd say here is that, you could use AI for quality control. It's not going to do the filing automation, but it's going to give you a better quality product to file. So if I was a CEO of a company, what's this going to mean to me? Probably going to mean I'm going to get many better nights of sleep, right? Because I'm not completely worried about this, I'm going to have a little less gray hair, right? And so, if I gray hair, if I'm a person doing the work, I'm not replacing the people that are doing the writing, right? I'm just catching
Yeah,
the errors
for sure.
before the SEC or the auditors do. So it's just another way to be more efficient, more effective, and then you have more confidence in the work you're doing and the reduced time. Efficiency, we go back to the same point. Efficiency, right? Efficiency, be more effective. Let the tools, help you be more efficient and more effective.
Right, right. Yeah. I think Gen AI could also be helpful in comparing not only maybe drafting MD&A, but comparing it to other filings and seeing
Absolutely,
where
absolutely.
improvements could be made, what have you, right?
Absolutely, and you could do that over, any time horizon you prefer.
Yeah. And that is with the power of Gen AI, with, about 7,000 publicly traded companies. There's a lot of information to compare and contrast.
And that's really the key is that, it's available to, a large body of people at a very good price point. And it's going to mean that, you're going to be a lot more efficient, effective, and that, your regulatory environment is going to be a lot more stable. And so that's going to create, a lot more, to be quite frank, confidence and happiness because you're going to be delivering a quality product that you feel good about, everybody feels good about, and it's repeatable. So it's not something that's a one-time thing. It's easily repeatable.
Yeah, it's got to be repeatable since reporting happens every quarter, and even potentially more frequently if you have an 8K or something like that. So we've talked about FP&A, we've talked about SEC reporting. Accounting and finance has a lot of operational aspects to it. So if you think about finance and accounting, automation in accounting operations, areas like AP or AR, and looking at sort of end-to-end automation, what kind of things have you seen or have insight in these operational areas?
One area is OCR for invoices. So, for example, you see these various projects and people spend a lot of time on, data mapping and data migration, and they still don't, quite get it right. And then, they test it during their user acceptance testing or system integration testing, and it doesn't quite go right. With AI, basically, it just needs to see the invoice really one time. It remembers where all the information is. And so by doing that, particularly, let's say you're a company, and most companies are this way, they have a certain percentage of the vendors that are pretty big vendors, right? And then we're talking Fortune 500 companies. So these are, stable vendors, their invoices are pretty consistent. But then you also have a population of vendors that are smaller and they don't use the standard invoice format. So you could spend, 80% of the time on 20% of the work trying to make sure you're getting the invoice validation correct. Same thing for POs, same thing for, routing, mismatches. And so basically it remembers these patterns. So the OCR with AI remembers these patterns, huge efficiency gain, because once it remembers it, it can then take what you have somebody actually manually typing in invoice data, and it could actually go do the update for you. They can remember it, go update, whether it's Workday or Oracle or SAP or NetSuite, go and actually do the update. And what the human just does is probably just runs a report and checks it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that some of that stuff is actually still manual when it can be automated through OCR, machine learning. But even now with Gen AI, the models to extract data effectively, accurately, quickly is just so much better than even 5 years ago.
I think that, some of the more mature shops are getting to this AI model and some aren't, but some of the less mature shops are just not there. But when you get there, what it means is that, you can cut cycle time by 60 to 70% of the time. And you're typically going to have about 80, 90% fewer duplicates and fraud. So the benefits are huge, when you get there, and you just need the right strategy. You need somebody to work with you on the roadmap, and then you need somebody to work with you, on the implementation. But if you do that, then, if you're looking at invoices, validating POs, routing information to the right place, and having the ability to not to have a bunch of people show up and do a big data migration project that takes weeks, takes a lot of time out of your organization, and turns out that, and you've seen this, Norm, it's not quite what you're looking for, right? But, you're in the close, right? We just talked about that, but you're in the close and somebody needs to meet with you to do data migration, data validation, right? So now you're taking
Yeah.
time away from something way more important to work on this, not to say that this isn't important, but, so on the AI side, I think the big thing, you're looking at is, how do you match transfers to invoices? How do you predict late payments? How do you forecast DSO? So what does that mean? So you want to make sure that, you got predictable cash flow, 2, 3 months ahead, right? And so that's the real value proposition that you can get from AI. And what the experts are saying, I looked at a couple studies one from PwC, and, I know Deloitte really well. PwC is saying that in this AP AR automation is a 3x revenue growth per employee, right? So
Mm,
think about that.
that's significant.
Deloitte is saying 80% of the CEOs plan to raise AI budgets in the next 2 years because they can see this cycle time improvements. They can see this fewer duplicates. Who doesn't want predictable cash flow, right? Who doesn't want to be able to
Absolutely.
estimate predictable cash flow, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So, there's a huge benefit with AP and AR automation, AI, and it's hard. It's a thing that's really, really hard to challenge.
Yeah, you talked about UAT, data migration, et cetera, just a moment ago. And I think, we both had experiences in, these large implementation projects. Do you think that Gen AI has a place in UAT and even hastening the ability for, users to actually test the process and the product, more quickly as well?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. A lot of the validation, right?
Yeah,
That you do.
exactly.
UAT is you have a case, right? You're working through a set of steps to see if you get an outcome you're looking for as a business user. AI can play a huge role there.
Yeah.
And for companies that aren't using AI, you're tying up a lot of resource time. Because this, Norm, like you got to get people to do UAT for any big transformation, any project. Back in the day, you could backfill people. In this current environment, that's really usually not an option. So you just got to take somebody. It's about carving out time from your existing schedule. And sometimes it's about carving out time from a period end close or a quarter end close. So what you want to do, what do you want to do? You want to find an efficient way to prevent that, right? So that people could focus on the core business functions and spend
Sure.
less time on testing.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely don't want to spend a lot of time on testing. You just want to get it designed. I mean, from a strategy standpoint, which you mentioned earlier, thinking about the big picture, what works, what might work best in this particular environment or company, and setting that strategy and then implementing it, with including testing and doing that all as quickly as possible seems very much within the grasp of most companies with Gen AI.
Exactly. It's really about planning. It's about
Mhm.
execution. So planning and execution are the two things.
Yeah.
So if you're not, whoever you're working with, if this is not part of the plan, and it's not getting executed, then you probably should be, thinking about, have you picked the right partner?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely that's very true. And so operationally, APAR definitely ripe areas for the use of Gen AI. Let's look at the top line on the P&L now. Revenue and revenue recognition, sales contract review, the revenue accounting, ASC 606, obviously very important component of not only the accounting process but company operations. Talk a little bit about, how Gen AI might be usable for ASC 606 and for revenue accounting teams?
Yeah, this is one that's really close to my heart. I've been on, I won't name names because I don't want to, give away the
Sure.
secrets, but
Yeah.
I can think of things that are now products because we were taking a lot of time to do contract review so that we could get revenue correctly because we had a letter from the auditor. And I could think of another situation where I spent a lot of money with a big consulting company to try to explain how to do contract review better, right? And I got a PowerPoint document, right, that I read, and I couldn't do anything more than read it. So what AI can do is it resolves this, right? So you can tell it, what the attributes you're looking for. Across industry, there's certain obligations you're going to look at, and you want to look at any unusual terms in a contract, that are problems. So, for example, a big one will be, like for example, net 30 versus net 180, right? So we know that in the United States, a lot of people want net 30, and we know that in other countries, 180 is more popular. We understand if you have partners in, say, Asia, Europe, and they're reselling for you, it's tough for them when there's net 30 because then they've got to pony up the money and so forth. And so reviewing the contract, reviewing the clauses, coming back with, what the revenue guidance is, you're basically saying that you probably need 50 to, 40% less deal desk people, right? Because this is something the deal desk is doing. You could automate this whole process. You could even give it to your salespeople so that instead of having to come to the deal desk, instead of having to come to the finance, they could do their own analysis and they'll know, what contract fits and what contract doesn't fit. And the
Yeah.
auditors will love it because it's easily to trace these AI docs. And and what it's going to mean for a company is that, there'll be a lot fewer restatements. So this is an area where I think there needs to be more emphasis because McKinsey
Mhm.
says only 22% of the companies are piloting this. But if you're part of that 22%, you're going to get an advantage because this is
Sure.
really low hanging fruit. I could take any contract that you give me and I could use Gen AI to, assess the 606 impact.
Yeah, so on the Gen AI, especially like contract review, and this might even apply to probably does apply to vendor contracts as well, where you're buying something, but here you're selling something, the Gen AI could be utilized. In terms of tools that you've seen or used, what are some things that might work out of the box or what can be, used by finance and accounting professionals today to help them with this type of review?
Two easy ones would be, ChatGPT or an Anthropic Claude. I mean, you could just, assuming your company has the right policy and you're not uploading something that, you're not supposed to be, you could easily upload it and it can analyze it with the right prompts within 5 minutes or
Right,
less.
right. Yeah.
You could have the
One
answers you're looking for. Any contract, any SOW that you could turn into a Word document or a PDF.
Yeah, definitely very powerful there, but I think the guardrails, like you mentioned, have to be in place so that the models aren't leveraging your proprietary data for their potential use. So,
Yeah, that's a great call out. And you and I have talked about the capability maturity model for AI. And so one of the first steps for any company is you need to license, one of these tools, one of these LLM models, whether it's chat or, whether it's Claude or Anthropic or, it could be Google or it could be Microsoft so that, you kinda create this wall around it. So it's okay for your people to upload it and it's proprietary to your team, and so you're not training a model or spilling your data out into the public. But once you do that, then you could turn this loose on your organization, and then basically the next thing you'd wanna do is just have some things in place to count the ROI, to count the amount of time saved.
yeah, yeah, that's really where
So it'll be really, again, it's to me one of those things where it's just one of those things where it'd be low hanging fruit and it's
yeah, for
about
sure.
strategy, execution, right policies. And, having the right policies, meaning you want to send your team to use AI. And this is an excellent way to get it started. It's something that people could immediately use and it's something that could be applied with, very little effort.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about that maturity model for a moment. We did talk about that, in some of our prior conversations, but I think when you have like listeners for this podcast talking about maturity model, I think many companies fall into, I think, one of the five categories that you talked about. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the maturity model, how it fits in with AI adoption.
Yeah, I think, one easy way to think about it is if you think about generative AI, you really think about prompts and responses. You ask the question, you
Right.
get a response.
Sure.
If you think about a, agentic AI, you really think about in the end, you prompt and it goes and does something for you. So, for example, you say that my laptop is not working. You log a ticket and say that, or you say that in Slack, or you say that in Teams. And then an AI engine picks that up, diagnoses the problem, gets you the proper support, closes the ticket. So it's the end-to-end process. And so when you start to look at the model and you start to look at the maturity model, is that you look at each company and see where they are. Like, for example, if you're level one, you might not have a license to chat GPT, Anthropic, or anything like that. That doesn't mean your people are using those tools. It just means that you don't have any guardrails around there. You don't have any policies around what's okay to use AI for, what's not okay. That doesn't mean it's not being done. It's just that you're not managing it, right? Then when you start to look at, people talk about pilots. I want to pilot, procurement. I want to pilot the customer experience. I want to pilot onboarding HR. So that then now you're moving into probably, maturity level two, because, you have typically in one, you come up with a strategy. This is, these are my goals. These are my objectives. You develop the roadmap, and you have funding. And ideally, this is something that's coming from right at the top, from the CEO is driving this. And now in two, now you come up with some very specific things you want to do and you want to evaluate. We call it UAT, but pilot is just testing something. We want to evaluate how well it works in our environment based on our specific use cases, which just a use case is just how we do business. And so now you're getting down. Let's say you did procurement, you did HR, you did support. You did customer support, and so now you figure out that, well, the one I like best is procurement. So that moves forward, right? So that goes into production. You're starting to use it. So then you move in another, you move into, another phase of the maturity model, maybe level 3. When you really get to level 5, then that would really mean to be a situation where you have Gen AI, you have angenic agents. They're talking to each other. You're seeing measurable ROI, both in hours saved, dollars saved, and many of the things we talked about now are implemented within your organization. Really to be able to understand how you're using AI, in my opinion, you really got to have this framework to assess your company and your company as a group of departments and a number of, people within those departments and to see how you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks for describing that 5-step maturity model. And in terms of use cases, we've talked about, the use case of Gen AI and FP&A, SEC reporting, operational accounting like AP and AR. We talked about ASC 606. One of the other areas that companies, I think, are trying to focus in on, and obviously it has a tremendous amount of value because you can gain insight into your financial statements and your financial condition very quickly if you can close your books faster. So hastening the close and getting visibility into your numbers benefits really everyone in the company, and being able to do that easier and faster makes people happy, as you said earlier. So talk about what you've seen in the close process and how that could be beneficial or benefited from the use of Gen AI.
I think probably 3 things I've seen is, auto accruals, improved reconciliation, depreciation schedules get, automated. And so basically this is AI explaining kind of these different entries in English. And what I'm seeing is that, anywhere from, 15-day to 8-day, close improvement, and seeing audit fees in the neighborhood dropping from 15 to 30%.
That's pretty significant.
So, again, if you look at what the experts are saying, over the next probably this is pretty, long period, but Deloitte's perspective is we could see this be auto autonomous in 6 years. So you could all of these sort of things, auto accruals, reconciliation, depreciation schedule, the close process in 6 years could be almost like getting a Waymo. You know? There are
Um,
no taxi drivers. Everything is, it's autonomous. So, that's when you start to really think about, what we see in the future. And this is really stuff where the rubber meets the road, right? You got AI doing journal entries with explanations so your auditor can that the auditor can read. So this is going to be a huge paradigm shift. But again, it's not that you're not going to have humans to review it. It's just that AI is going to be doing a lot of the work.
Yeah, yeah, the human in the loop probably won't go away, but there'll be less doing, but more reviewing
And
and higher level,
analyzing
more analytical work.
insights, providing, great guidance because they have the time. They've moved from that, calculation role to the strategic partner that everyone wants to be. I mean, you know this, Norm. We can go back years. And if you look at, any offsite you go to or anybody is prepared for offsite or anybody talk about that team, there's 2 words you hear: strategic partner. I mean, you can go to almost any company, whatever department, they wanna be strategic partners. So they wanna work with if you're an FP&A, you wanna be a strategic partner to all of these departments. So when they're doing their
Sure.
budgets, and so if you're in HR, you wanna be a strategic partner, right? So any group you're in, procurement, I wanna be a strategic partner, right? So, AI is gonna help people be strategic partners, and all of the teams want this. All of the leaders in marketing, all of the teams, sales, all of the teams want this. Partner organization, everyone wants to be a strategic partner, and the challenge has been like, how do I find a way to do that? And do the day-to-day work or quarterly work or, period end work, year-end work.
Yeah, yeah. So we've talked about, I think, some great use cases. Let's just touch a little bit about data, because in the value chain and also within the maturity model, if the company's data isn't well indexed, the metadata isn't there, it seems to me that the potential for hallucinations could be higher. So what insight or thoughts do you have about preparing data in order for it to be usable by Gen AI effectively?
I think it's kinda some of the, the normal data hygiene, cleanliness stuff. Then I guess I'll first start by it kinda depends. So, if you're a CFO and you want or, head of sales and you want insights on deals closing, so you wanna look at, let's say if you bought Salesforce and you wanna look at opportunities, different stages, amounts, when they're gonna close. You want feedback to your sales team about what's the next best step. You're in finance and you're trying to do the same thing. Then data is really super important, right? Probably a little less important if you're just, opening a ticket that needs something fixed, right? Because the data is kind of getting created at that time. So, all of the things about having data stewards, people that own the data in the various departments, having a routine to review, clean up, and make sure your data has good hygiene. And so it's kind of the same old story. I mean, if you give AI inconsistent data, you're probably going to get inconsistent insights and responses. So the better the data is, the better the insight is. So you want AI to learn from good data, and you want your models to train on good data and not erroneous data, or what you were describing as, hallucinations.
Yeah, yeah. We've covered a lot of great use cases here. Before I get into my last question, I just want to remind our listeners that if you find this content valuable, please do like and subscribe and share with your network. So, my last question to you, Wayne, is you've done a lot of strategic planning, partnered with companies, and looked at end to end processes. And we actually worked together on some major projects ourselves. What can you leave the audience with at this point, in terms of insights from your experience on strategy and implementation of AI for their particular use case?
One option, I'd say option A is start small, maybe AP, prove ROI and expand. Or, start small with something like, licensing ChatGPT, Anthropic. So prove it. So get people using it in some of their day-to-day work and, prove it out. Also, reviewing, contracts, ASC 606 is really could be a small thing. So get your arms around it, get a strategy. I think the other thing is part of my first option is you need to be able to assess where are you. Should take between 30 to 90 days. And then, you could come up with a roadmap of, how you're going to go about it. Super important to have sponsorship at the right level. This shouldn't be something that's typically undertaken by just a particular organization within a company and not have any real strategic funding and so forth. Because you're going to need funding to be able to do this. I think when you start to think about it, you should probably be thinking about how do I get in a competitive advantage using this in the next 2 to 3 years. So you should really be thinking about, so as you come up with your plan, you should be thinking about what are the areas within your company that you can use AI to get a competitive advantage in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think the other thing is that you need to be able to explain what you're doing in a way where people trust it, so
Sure.
they need to be able to trust that what you're doing with AI is something that is going to be helpful. And I think if you do that, it's really AI can really has the potential to elevate finance. And again, it'll go back to, I think strategic partners are really advisors. So you go back to that advisory role and you're not processing. So I think that would be my, guidance for teams. So when you start to look at a lot of different things you do, whether there's transformations and your programs or different things, and you're getting SOWs from your trusted partners and so forth. If AI is not a big part of this, then, you may be building something that is not going to give you a competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be built into the strategic plan at this point, for sure. No doubt about that. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Wayne, thank you so much for sharing your insights and what you've seen as a strategist when it comes to finance and accounting. Always appreciate your insight. And as usual, great talking to you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Norm.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. And until next time, stay transparent.